The Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921 was the single largest incident of racial violence in American history. It happened during a very perilous time for African Americans, an era of lynching, of the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, which was the largest terrorist organization in American history. But there were some events that happened in Tulsa. There was an incident in an elevator between an African American male teenager and a white American elevator operator. We don't know what happened actually in the elevator, but the next day, one of Tulsa's afternoon newspapers, the Tulsa Tribune, published an inflammatory article saying it was an interracial rape attempt. And they also published an editorial entitled "To Lynch Negro Tonight." And within a half an hour of that paper coming out, a lynch mob started to gather downtown at the Tulsa courthouse. The mob grew over the hours, 200, 300, 500, 1,000. Then around 10:30 at night, a group of African-American World War I veterans, all armed, went down to the courthouse, presented themselves to the sheriff, said, "We're here to help defend the prisoner." They were turned away, but as they went, an elderly white man tried to disarm one of the black vets. A shot was fired, and the race massacre began.
Now, as I understand it, ultimately, the National Guard was called in around the 1st of June to kind of put things to rest. Is that correct?
That's correct. The state troops, the National Guard troops from Oklahoma City, were called in, but there were local units of the National Guard who were involved early. But by the time the state troops had arrived, Tulsa's black community, known as Greenwood, had already been largely destroyed. A mob of whites, we don't know how big, maybe 5,000, invaded the black neighborhoods, looting and burning more than 1,000 homes and businesses to the ground.
In a statement to VOA, the Oklahoma National Guard called the events in 1921 nothing short of horrific. And while there are widely varying accounts of the role played by the National Guard during the rioting, the truth of the matter is that many of Tulsa's white citizens committed atrocious acts against their neighbors and guardsmen. However, the historical record shows that a handful of brave guardsmen protected the Tulsa Armory and the weapons inside from more than 300 white rioters. The actions of these guardsmen substantially reduced the number of murders in the Greenwood district. And in the days following the riots, Oklahoma guardsmen restored the order to the area and prevented further attacks by both black and white Tulsans. So that was 1921. This is 2020. It's 99, just over 99 years after the race riot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 150 plus years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. And this is coming at a time where we have worldwide protests addressing inequality and systemic racism. So I guess the question I have for you, and it's a very difficult one, why are we still having these kinds of conversations, so many years after the fact?
Well, I think one reason is, there's a couple reasons. One reason is that much of our history has been suppressed. There are certain versions of American history that school children learn, and oftentimes some of the more darker spots are wiped away and people don't know about them. So that's been a process. The White Race Massacre was actively suppressed for decades. It's been a long process to get that story out. The other is that, American society is far from perfect, but there's been a lot of change. Certainly been great changes in my lifetime. So as people start to learn more and get a more accurate and fuller picture of our nation's past, I think people are starting to question what it is that we as a nation should do today.
So is education the primary way to address this?
I think it's a very important way to address it, but I also think we have a larger problem, which is America is a nation that is obsessed by race. Americans think about race when they when they go out the front door, what neighborhood they're going to, when they walk into a room, and we talk about it. But the problem is, we tend to talk about it only with people who look like us. And we are still a segregated society by school districts, by churches, by neighborhoods. What we need to do is to start having honest, face-to-face conversations about race with people who don't look like us, to be able to listen, to understand their perspective, not to be accusatory. And I think once we have a better idea as to where we've been and where we're at, we'll have a better plan for where we should go in the future.